Come in, come in. Come away in. Hi, lovely to see you come in. That's very good timing. You've managed to drop round on New Year's Eve. We've only just got back. We literally been driving most of the day. Have a seat. We were up for a friend's 70th birthday right up in glorious and beautiful County Durham, up in Weardale. It was a great occasion. He was a musician and is a musician, and loads of other musicians turned up. It was a great night. And we made our way back down over the Dales, you know, down from County Durham into Yorkshire, and saw High Force at Teesdale. Force being, of course, a kind of derivation from the Scandinavian word foss, meaning waterfall, like the words beck and dale are all Viking words, because the Vikings were out there. Anyway, I'm not thinking about the Vikings today particularly, but more about the Scots side of our heritage, speaking of which, here's a nice Isla whiskey, Bowmore, because of course it's Hogmanay, it's New Year's Eve. Now, when I was a vicar in Cambridge, we had a very fine set of bells at St Edward, King and Martyr, and it was a big thing for the team of ringers to come in and ring in the new year. And I would always join them, and we'd all have a drink up there in the belfry, and it was magnificent seeing them pulling on the rapes and this very, very intricate art of change ringing, where the sequence of the bells alters subtly on a kind of mathematical principle, and one bell, as it were, makes its way on the list from first to last and back again. It really is the case in change ringing that the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Perhaps that's the origin of it, I don't know. Anyway, I always used to read with them and for them the great passage from Tennyson's in Memoriam, which I'm sure I've read to you before, but it stands reading again. The Ring Out Wild Bells, which is one of the great, as I believe they say now, inflection points in the poem. It's a churn, it's a change. He's been writing these mournful rhymes, as he calls them, really expressing the bitterness of grief. And of course, all the big occasions like Christmas and birthdays and New Year's, every grieving person knows have a kind of sharpness to them. But eventually he gets to the point where he can celebrate, you know, everything that was great about his friend, and also look forward to change in the best sense amidst all this change ringing. So I always used to read that poem and that section of the poem, and I'll read it to you now. But there came a point when I'd done it so often, and I was beginning to work on my own cycle of poems going through the Christian year, sounding the seasons. I thought I ought to borrow a metaphor from that very art of I ought to ring the changes a little bit on what we did. So I wrote my own poem about the bells being rung on New Year's Day. So as you come on New Year's Eve, I'll perhaps read you the Tennyson as a New Year's Eve poem, and then you will carry over, as it were, over the midnight hour, and I'll read you my own little poem, shorter poem, my sonnet, as a kind of New Year's Day poem. So anyway, I actually set the Tennyson, this is my anthology, Waiting for the Word. I set the Tennyson for New Year's Day, as it happens in that book. But it's really a New Year's Eve poem, because it's about ringing out the old and ringing in the new. And it's full of, you know, Tennyson's great music of language, and many of his most, again, to borrow the prevailing metaphor, some of his most ringing phrases. So here we are. It's section 106 of In Memoriam. I'm sure you know it. Ring out, wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out, wild bells, and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind for those that here we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be. It's an amazing moment in the context of the whole poem when that famous line, ring in the Christ that is to be, sounds out from within the poem. Because the poem, as he began it, starts in all kinds of doubt and difficulty and despair at the apparently meaningless sudden loss and early death of his friend, and then he becomes aware of all the kind of species that have come and gone, and where is God's hand in all of this, and he really wrestles with it. And in the end, his answer is to come to Christ, to a Christ who is within time and the process of it, as well as eternally and beyond it. And he wrote actually the little prelude to it that he at the end of it comes at the beginning by way of prelude. After he'd had this moment, he talks about our little systems have their day, they have their day and cease to be. They are but broken lights of thee, and thou, O Lord, art more than they. It's a wonderful poem. Anyway, so many phrases from that. I mean, we could just apply to our politics on both sides of the Atlantic about the civic slander and the spite, and ring that out, ring out the slowly dying chords, the ancient forms of party strife, and ringing in the larger heart. It's just fantastic. Anyway, perhaps we're going from the sublime to the ridiculous if we go now to my New Year's Day poem. But it was an attempt on my part to get a feel for what it is to hear those bells, especially hearing them rung in the day on New Year's Day. And here we are, New Year's Day, church bells. I tried to get the sound of it. I think we were just getting, I wrote this, I should think 13 or 14 years ago. And it was published 11 years ago. And we were just starting to all carry those little pages and messages and mobile phones going off, and everybody was just getting sat navs. And I was thinking of all this kind of electronic squawking that was going on. And then there I was in the tower while they were ringing bells that were cast in the 15th and 16th centuries. We got a bell there from like 1510, or maybe it's even 1490s. It says, Anna, ora pro nobis, Anna, pray for us. Anyway, it's inscribed on the bell. So here's my poem, New Year's Day, Church Bells. Not the bleak speak of mobile messages, the soft chime of synthesized reminders, not texts, not pages, data packages, not sat-nav or locators ever find us as surely, soundly, deeply as these bells that sound and find and call us all at once. Ears of my ears can hear, my body feels this call to prayer that is itself a dance. So ring them out in joy and jubilation. Sound them in sorrow, tolling for the lost. Oh, let them wake the church and rouse the nation, a sleeping lion stirred to life at last. Begin again, they sing, again begin, a ring and rhythm answered from within. So you can see I tried to get a bit of the sound of the bells into the poem, as indeed Tennyson did. And I still feel stirred and called and almost haunted, as Coleridge said he was, by the great sound of church bells ringing. Anyway, we'll ring out the old and ring in the new, and here's to a happy new year to you and yours.